Good evening. Before we begin, just remember to silence any cell phones or other devices you might have with you. My name is Rhoda McKenzie, and I'm on the curriculum committee of the Keese School. And I'm delighted to introduce to you tonight Bing Garthright, a fellow Asbury resident who is often seen around the campus taking a walk with his wife Patty, who is here in the front row. So we welcome her too. It was on one of those walks that Bing approached me and said he had an idea for the Keese School. And I said, well, what's the topic? And he said, well, investigating UFOs. I thought that sounded pretty interesting. So I told him to send me some more information, and he did, and so here he is tonight. His talk is entitled, Investigating UFO Reports and Getting an Answer. And then he wrote, in 24 years of following the UFO controversies, including 10 years as a volunteer investigator of reports, Bing Garthright had many interesting sighting reports and lines of inquiry. He will explain the revelation that caused him to stop his investigations, and he will describe how these experiences changed his view of both science and his 1950s Southern education. I'm sure you're as eager as I am to hear about Bing's experience investigating UFOs, so let's give Bing a warm welcome.
There we go. How's this sound? Okay? All right, very good. Good evening, and let me begin by telling you how I came to be a volunteer UFO investigator. In 1964, I was a grad student in mathematics at Duke University when a new student tried to interest me in the UFO controversy. I was reluctant, but agreed to read a book that he loaned me. Okay, I'm pushing the button. There we go. I have to push it with more sincerity, I think, next time. Okay. This is the book. It was published by an entity entitled National Investigating Committee on Aerial Phenomena. They were ahead of their time because that's the AP of UAP now. It was then known by its initials as NICAP. NICAP was founded by retired Air Force Major Donald Kehoe and had an impressive board of governors and panel of special advisors. The board included the founder of the Civil Air Patrol, who was also president of the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, 5 retired Air Force officers, a retired Rear Admiral of the Navy, 4 religious leaders, 2 scientists, and others. The panel of special advisors included 32 members, mostly engineers, astronomers, physicists, and specialists in photography, psychology, and communications. So I found the source very respectable through association with so many distinguished and serious people. After reading the book and thinking about its evidence, I had doubts that UFO reports were accurate, and I didn't believe in alien visitors. Only many years later did I realize that Major Kehoe and most of the board lacked qualifications for either scientific or police investigations. Also years later, I would discover that the first debunking books had already debunked many of the most striking reports in NICAP's UFO evidence. NICAP published a monthly news magazine about the topic, but it never gave any rebuttals to the debunking literature. Looking back to that time, I believe that was because Major Kehoe never wanted his members to discover the debunking literature. Back then, people could not Google the topic and see many viewpoints. In my case, I was also busy trying to survive grad school and earn my union card. While I was still at Duke, there was a small flap of UFO sightings just a bit west in Greensboro. I decided to make at least a small effort to see a UFO. With a friend, I took deck chairs up to the flat roof of the physics and math building and watched the sky from about 9 p.m. till midnight. I saw wonderful meteor flashes and a few large satellites. After graduation, I worked in Fort Worth, Texas. I was there about 5 months when I saw a notice that Stanton Friedman, who held an MS degree in physics, was giving a talk to promote his latest book on UFOs. Of course, I went. In his question period, several people told him that they had seen UFOs. He then asked if anyone there were a member of NICAP. I rose and said I was. I had joined to get the newsletter. In his question, he asked whether I would be willing to write up people's reports and send them to NICAP. I said yes and gave out my contact information. A month later, I got a phone call at 11 p.m., well after my wife and I were trying to sleep. With that began my first encounter with a UFO reporter. The reporter was a 14-year-old boy. The night was very cold and clear. The boy claimed he was watching a big light in the sky that was moving around this way and that and rotating. I asked him to go to a window that had multiple panes, position himself so the light was near the vertical and horizontal edges of a pane. He did. Now, I said, is the light moving? He said yes. So I drove over to his house. He met me outside. I said, is the light moving now? He said yes. So I took him over to a leafless small tree where we could judge its position through some tree limbs. It was obviously stationary. He only agreed that it had stopped moving in the last minute or two. He said the light was also rotating because he could see a colored light on the body that showed horizontal rotation. I told him I did not see the light rotating, but a bright star would always stimulate a color receptor occasionally. I assured him he was looking at what appeared to be a bright star. He assured me that the glowing object had given him ideas on how to improve his chess play. My next investigation of a report would be about 4 years later. 2 job hops later found me in Gaithersburg, Maryland, very near the headquarters of NICAP, which was just up in West Virginia. About that time, I read the government-sponsored Condon report. Let's see if I can. Good. All right. This was the report that the Air Force and the Congress got together and said, we want to know what you really know. So this was done at that time. The Condon report said that UFO reports, the reports, could not be studied scientifically. So that was their conclusion. Sorry, you can't do it. The Condon report also refused to publish a dissent by 2 of its committee members. I got word about that. I found the book irrelevant. In 1973, I decided to see whether it was possible to study UFO reports in a meaningful way. I contacted NICAP and volunteered to investigate reports in my area, this area. Major Kehoe offered me both Montgomery and Frederick counties together. And that is how I came to be a volunteer UFO report investigator. What did my investigation show me? Within 2 weeks, NICAP notified me that Montgomery County Police had a report for me to investigate. I should add that most of this came through police, and they were very happy to have someone to refer people to. Very happy. I phoned the woman who called the police to report her sighting. She said that driving east on Montrose Road, she saw what she could only describe as a double Ferris wheel flying on its side. I immediately volunteered that it could be a commercial airplane. They fly at night with advertising signage, but I didn't know there was one flying. I called the Montgomery County Air Park and learned that such a plane had just come into town shortly before and was flying regularly. I asked to see the flight plans for the plane. I learned that civil aviation was not then required to file planes with anyone. The air park verified that the plane had wildly changing colored lights. The woman was delighted to learn that she had not been hallucinating. A few more simple reports followed, and then my biggest one erupted. Brunswick, Maryland police asked NICAP to investigate a night sighting that involved at least a dozen members of a CB radio club. That was Citizens Band Radio. All of us remember it. The kids don't know what it is. At sundown, 2 members of the club were drinking brews in their truck on the east edge of town, high on a cliff, with their CB radio on. They saw a strange, solid light come across the lowland and appear to pause over some woods nearby. They drove in the direction of the light and said it was hovering silently and then zoomed away. They asked other club members to get outside and see if they could spot it. Then for about 3 hours, club members shared reports of sightings using their anonymous handles, CB handles. On the east side of the lowland is a ridge called Marleau Ridge for its Lutheran camp that sits atop it. The camp has a large illuminated white cross that is a distinctive landmark. Many saw lights passing over the cross or seeming to pause over it. Another witness felt his view was obstructed by a hill on his farm, so he ran out to the top of the hill for an unobstructed view. He saw bright lights coming his way, and then a powerful spotlight shone right on him and paused. He was terrified. I think I would have been too. After perhaps a minute, the lights headed back toward the Potomac River. The most bizarre report was broadcast by Pipe Bender. That was his CB handle. He reported a football-shaped glowing object about 40 feet long that had hovered near a small bridge and then blew up, the parts scattering into a recently cleared cornfield. So all of that was told initially to NICAP by the Brunswick police. Now, how did NICAP want me to investigate the big one with more than a dozen witnesses in more than 10 locations? Major Kehoe told me I had to include on my team for this big one 3 longtime members of NICAP. One would bring a Geiger counter to detect radiation. Another had some private investigator experience. I was happy to have a team. A few CB club members agreed to meet us, but they had little to report from personal observations. They all wanted to tell me what Pipe Bender had reported. None of them said they knew who Pipe Bender was. anonymity was allowed in the club. One member contacted me and invited us to his house in a high area of the city. He said that he saw an ordinary small aircraft fly by his window shortly after the excitement began. Next, we went to the bridge and cornfield identified by Pipe Bender's report and learned that corn cobs are radioactive. They concentrate phosphorus, phosphates, various phosphates, and that excites a Geiger counter. But no UFOs were needed to produce that effect. All of them were evenly radioactive. We found no residue from an alien craft in that cornfield. The farmer who had the frightening experience with the light beam on the hill in his field volunteered to be interviewed about a week later. He had a full-time job at the aluminum plant and lived on his family farm, which he owned. He was embarrassed that he experienced fear at his encounter. He did not recall noises consistent with any of the helicopters that he had seen. So there things stood for a few weeks. Then I got word that Pipe Bender was willing to be interviewed. We all four of us went to his house one evening. 3 of us followed him upstairs, me included, while one of my team lingered downstairs with his wife, probably the private investigator, I'm guessing. Pipe Bender repeatedly asked us to reassure him that we did not think he was crazy. We did not think that, and we told him so. He reiterated all the reports that he had made that night. Some others were quite strange, too. We bid him good night and drove to a diner to discuss what we thought. The team member who stayed downstairs with the wife cracked the case. The wife told him that Pipe Bender was already tipsy from drinking when he heard the excitement on the CB. He called a friend with a big convertible to pick him up, and they rode around making up reports. They laughed about it, but not on the CB. He was a practical joker, and this was his best joke to date. Now we knew that Pipe Bender's fake reports had polluted the entire set of shared reports. And that's where things stood for a few more weeks. Then I got a call from a deputy sheriff who said he had found out a few things that would help my investigation. I met him to hear his story with the understanding that much of it would have to be private to protect a good Army officer. There is an Army installation in Virginia near the Potomac that is a poorly kept secret. Several locals are known to work on the mountain. The mountain maintained emergency communication capabilities to be used if Washington, D.C. got bombed or had a major power outage. The mountain also possessed an amazing helicopter with lights designed for night searches in Vietnam. The commanding officer's son had gone rafting on the Potomac that day and had failed to return. This was before cell phones were common. The officer ordered his helicopter to search the river area for his son in case the boy's raft might have punctured and he might be on a rock in the Potomac or wandering the fields to find help. The helicopter used jet-powered propulsion instead of sort of a turbo, instead of more familiar internal combustion engine back then. Apparently most of them do the jet-propelled now. When the crew saw the farmer running up to the top of the hill, they had to check to see if it was the missing boy. When they saw it was not, they went back to searching the river. The farmer's report was as honest as Pipe Bender's was false. The Army officer would have been in big trouble if the story went public. His concern for his son did not justify sending the helicopter on that mission. I filed my final report to NICAP with the conclusion that a helicopter was probably searching the area that night. And that concluded my most interesting investigation. I had many others, but they were all pretty, I saw a light, there was no sound, that kind of thing. And many sightings also of the planet Venus. Shortly afterward, my second wife was alone in our house upstairs when she saw a classic sci-fi UFO, complete with colored lights spinning on its disk edge. She ran outside to get a better look, and it flew over our house. When it was overhead, she read this message in lights at the center: "Not a UFO." It was another flying sign aircraft. They go around like wandering people every now and then. They don't stay in one place. My mother's UFO sighting came a couple of years later. She was about to get in line for a toll bridge over the James River to Southside Richmond, Virginia. Any Richmonders here? Okay, it was the Nickel Bridge. You wouldn't know about it. She saw the bridge traffic was standing still before she got on. She looked to the far side of the river and saw an enormous ball of lights. No driver on the bridge was getting any closer to that bizarre light display. She avoided the traffic jam by going a few miles downriver to the next bridge. Those lights turned out to be on a military-style helicopter searching the river for a missing kayaker. Now, in addition to investigating reports, later on, I'm going to mention, this was actually probably after the next things I'm going to tell you about. My other investigation was by reading. Many authors write about the possibilities that UFOs have biblical references. Ezekiel and the wheel, flaming chariots, visions of flying creatures, the pillar of fire that accompanied the Hebrews in the desert, etc. But no witness then or now have gotten, no writers then or now have gotten very deep into the sighting of the sun dancing in the sky in 1915 in Fatima, Portugal. The most agreed image is of a huge disk, colored like mother of pearl, with lights on its edge, wobbling crazily as it penetrated overcast clouds at the moment that 3 children had predicted a visit by the Virgin Mary, noon. More than 1,000 witnesses, rapt with religious excitement, claimed to see this sighting. They didn't claim all of them exactly the same sighting, but they all agreed that the sun was dancing around the sky. You couldn't see, but there's one break in the clouds. But one British lady of good repute insisted she saw none of it. The official Catholic Church investigator found the British woman report credible. This meant to the investigating priest that the experience was spiritual and had no material cause. It was years later that the Roman Catholic Church almost reluctantly agreed that it was acceptable to believe in this spiritual event and to believe that the children had seen the Virgin Mary. The Pope was given a message by the children that could only be revealed many years later, and the message has been revealed. It was not disturbing to the church. I was fascinated by this possible UFO sighting for a couple of years, but now I consider it just a mass hallucination. And going back to the earlier one with Pipe Bender and the rest, once you hear an exciting interpretation of an event, and you've seen it sort of, but not real well, you tell other people the best description that you've heard. You repeat that, and pretty soon that becomes the one that everybody remembers. But a lot of people did think they saw this disk come break through the clouds or hang right in the clouds and make a bit of a hole. So why in 1984 did I almost quit my government career in order to become a full-time UFO investigator? In 1984, my father died and left me a small inheritance. It was enough to allow me to take 6 weeks leave without pay to explore whether I should buy NICAP for $30,000 and greatly improve investigation methods for UFO reports. I had a lot of ideas. Major Kehoe was ready for full retirement and NICAP was broke. NICAP's records and such were being held here in Gaithersburg by a general aviation lobbyist who had loaned NICAP $30,000. My inheritance could also cover that $30,000, and that would make me the owner of NICAP. I had become fed up with my operations research career at that point. I also had definite ideas about how to improve the investigation of reports. I took unpaid leave and began my study of the field by attending a MUFON conference. MUFON stands for Mutual UFO Network and is an entirely non-government entity. It had many members then, and it's still active. The MUFON convention was in Durham, North Carolina, and the meetings were in a large tent. A psychologist gave a convincing talk that showed that investigators must never hypnotize people who claimed to have been abducted by aliens or had had a sighting that involved a big time gap. He proved to any reasonable listener that hypnotism just led to fantasizing and led to greater belief in false accounts. His talk was rewarded with warm applause and supportive questions. The following speaker had interviewed a claimed abductee that he found credible because the abductee had remembered the abduction only when hypnotized. I immediately felt so bad for that presenter because the audience had just been told that hypnotism was worse than useless for recovering memories. It is, by the way. I anticipated withering questions from the audience at the end. Instead, the presenter got the same warm applause and only friendly questions. I was staggered. That incident and the rest of the event convinced me that MUFON was mostly a social activity. I'm still convinced. Since I was considering buying NICAP, I tried to visit Major Kehoe, but he refused with a series of weak reasons. I found this discouraging about NICAP. Coincidentally, I had subscribed to the Smithsonian Institution's lecture series, and to my great good fortune, they had scheduled a lecture by Alan Hendry, the author of an important book on UFO report investigations. Hendry had insisted Alan Hynek, the author of this book, Alan Hynek created CUFOS, Center for UFO Studies. He was up at Northwestern University, and he was distinguished professor by that time, I think, of astronomy. He had been the astronomer consultant to Project Blue Book, the Air Force investigation of UFO reports. He wrote about those in this book. The book is very friendly to the UFO enthusiast community. Alan Hendry had assisted him. Hendry, now giving lectures on his own book tour. Okay, what happened? Is that Alan Hendry? Patty, is that Alan Hendry?
There should be one more.
Okay. I must have done too much sincerity on the clicker. I went too far forward. This is the last book. Okay. Now this is at the Smithsonian. I went down there where they give the wonderful lecture series. And he had done something brilliant with several years of Hynek's data. The data set had more than 1,500 reports, about half of which had been successfully identified. He coded each report in terms of aspects of the sighting, such as reactions by farm animals, car engine stalling, sounds, lost time, markings on the ground, landings, visible occupants, etc. He used good statistical programs to compare the identified reports, the identified with the unidentified reports, to see what signals might emerge that would show something about the unidentified reports. To his surprise, there was no signal at all. Animal reactions, cars stalling, etc., were not significantly different in the two sets. I'm still astonished by that. His conclusion was that we must wait for a really strange sighting, preferably with material evidence that we can analyze in a lab. So what did Alan Hendry's lecture do for me? I should add mathematical statistics as my bag, so I understood what he did with his packages. Hendry's lecture convinced me that improving methods for capturing data from sightings was going to be a waste of time. If I got the size more accurate, it wasn't 200 feet, it was 100 feet, this wasn't going to change things. There was no signal in the noise of those reports. And better interview methods, even with very powerful tools, would not solve the puzzle. I kept my $30,000 and changed careers in my agency to a purely scientific career. 3 years later, I resigned from my NICAP investigator role. My scientific career was a very happy one and continued for 21 more years of federal service. So what do I conclude about the limitations of my Southern upbringing, my mathematics studies, and human witnesses as observers? My Southern upbringing and education taught me to seek truth by consulting the right authorities. Now, that's not bad, but that's about where it ended. NICAP's board and its committee of special advisors, with retired military officers, engineers, scientists, religious leaders, made its claims worthy of consideration. What I lacked, though, was a good method of investigation. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know what questions to ask. My Southern education went out of its way, by the way, to avoid doubts and controversies. For example, I never heard a teacher discuss evolution, not even in my freshman college biology class. Never. I also knew too little about human behavior. I did not know how many people were willing to believe things for purely social reasons. I also did not realize that once UFO proponents get other people interested in what they can tell about UFOs, it's hard for them to drop those stories, even after someone else has thoroughly debunked them. A nice fellow in this area with a PhD in physics from a good school fell into that trap about 40 years ago, and he is still trapped. As for my university education, I did not realize that it had not even scratched the surface of useful techniques for investigating what people claim to witness. Almost any police detective has better report investigating procedures than almost any scientist. The scientists don't know how to use the right techniques. They don't know the techniques. Finally, I did not know how poorly people witness phenomena, especially at night or when emotions have been aroused. Airplane landing lights, I've seen this, are rarely pointed directly at anyone's eyes. But when they do go from near to right at our eyes, the light grows instantly, like, at least it does for my eyes, looking like it zoomed toward me and then stopped cold. And then 10, 20 seconds later, it continues, and it's not pointed straight at me. It looks exactly like the light now zoomed away because it's now smaller. And the speed, of course, would be astounding. The planet Venus, in many conditions, can seem to have rotating lights of different colors, or just lights on top and bottom. Subtle muscle twitches can make Venus appear to be moving about. It's a dark sky, you have no reference, and the stars aren't out much, but Venus is, you have nothing to judge by. And little twitches in your eye muscles will make you think Venus is dancing about. At late middle age and beyond, some of us, me included, have floaters, small proteins in our eye jelly. These look exactly like the hot dog-shaped UFOs sometimes seen in the daytime, outdoors. Our eyes need instruments to assess them. But those instruments on military planes that project images on their windshields have shown internal parts of cameras looking like flying objects. Fortunately, they didn't shoot at them. Alan Henry's cautions are still correct. We will have to wait for solid evidence before we can do a worthy investigation. Thank you. Now I welcome questions and comments. We've got microphones, I'm sure, that'll be coming around. If anybody would like to tell about a UFO sighting, that's great too. We've got a hand, your mic is coming.
Two questions from a reliable source. The first is he wants to know if UFOs can travel faster than the speed of light, does that mean they can bend space? And the second question is, should we presume that UFOs are hostile or friendly?
Who are we talking about that might, do I think they're hostile or friendly? Or I don't think they're any alien craft at all, myself. I will give you some encouragement to people who want to think about alien spacecraft. Most of us by now have read someone say the following: unless you can go faster than the speed of light, you're many thousands of years away for these other star systems, and our star system clearly doesn't have intelligent life on any of the planets except ours. So that's the end of the story. But then you have to ask yourself, but look how old the universe is. We're a baby. Our stellar system is only about 4 billion years old, and the universe is about 14. So someone may have been, some civilization may have been expanding from star system to star system for billions of years and successfully increasing its numbers, spreading all over the universe, learning all kinds of things and sending them back through some big network of knowledge, some big internet, real internet. But that's as close as I can come to imagining alien species being here. But I see nothing yet. I will tell you this, I got 2 reports that I knew were very advanced Air Force aircraft, that they don't tell the public to come see it. The Blackbird, they now show the Blackbird, but for a long time they didn't. And that's the Mach 3.5 triangular plane. And I got another report of a stealth plane, which looked very, very weird. There are all kinds of things. The Air Force will will do trial runs, and they will put out flares that float for a long time and blow along they don't just come soaring down to the ground. And they'll have interesting patterns. Okay, we have another question.
You may have referenced a point of fact, but the modern word for UFO is unidentified aerial phenomena.
Yes. That's correct. When I was doing them, they were UFOs, and UAP even then was a better name. Let's see. Well, NICAP itself had aerial phenomena in the title of their organization. So you're right. It's aerial phenomena. One of the most spooky things to see in Wallops Island, Virginia, they'll put up these rockets that'll put out, I don't know, some kind of powder that'll form like a disc shape. And if they do it about the right time of day, it is quite scary. But what they're doing is studying the upper atmospheric movements of the very thin atmosphere. But yeah, aerial phenomena is what it's all about. But what people really want to know about is, are there some spaceships? Seems to be what excites people.
You were in Texas for a while. Did you ever get any reports about the Marfa lights, the famous Marfa lights out of Texas?
No, they were well written about at that time, and people still argue about those. Yeah, yes. I will add something else. We've got, are you looking for a microphone? Good, right over here. I can always fill time with digressions till the time's up, so.
Well, my story is sort of an old one. It comes from 1969 or somewhere in that region. And flying at 35,000 feet, the pilot asked the daylight. We're in daylight. The pilot asked that the crew members go to the cockpit because he had seen an object in the sky and he wanted backup because he would obviously have to make a report. It was a beautiful, beautiful light that had a blue tinge to it. It was huge and moved erratically. It would stay in one spot for a while and then move to another spot. And very, very fascinating. 3 days later, they told us that it was a weather balloon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's the end of the story.
That's a much repeated, thank you for bringing that up, because that's a very much repeated experience for pilots. And what I don't quite understand is, if the balloon is at some distance away, it can appear to be moving about. It's very convincing. And sometimes they even imagine that the balloon is going with them. But
Yes.
the fact is they can verify the exact time, the exact altitude, they know everything about the balloon. Now it's possible that there's a sneaky spaceship up there studying the balloon, and we didn't see the balloon, we saw the spaceship.
Yes,
But-
I couldn't quite believe the balloon story because of all the movement that took place.
Yeah, I don't know. I cannot imagine why they appear to move around so much. But apparently they do. I don't understand it. So that's a good one.
They move around because of clear air turbulence. They get caught in eddies. It's very standard. I've done a lot of tracking of them, and you know, if they get, I mean, they're at a certain size, and so they get caught in the clear air turbulence that the airplane doesn't respond to, but it's there. and those speeds can be, tens of meters a second. And so, depending on what your perspective is, they look like they, as you said in some of the other stuff, looks like they moved. Well, most of it was a changed perspective. And then they've got an instrument underneath, and that confounds the whole behavior. They aren't like a party balloon at all.
Thank you. That's great. I know more. I'm learning more than I'm teaching tonight. This is terrific. Anybody else have a question or observation or just a thought about it if you want to?
Bing, you indicated at the start this has somehow changed your worldview. Could you expand on that just a little bit?
Oh, well, let's see. I'm going to get home tonight when I'm having my French silk pie, and then I'm going to think of the best answer for this in the world. But the thing is, human witness. It's tough for me to be on a jury now, because I've met so many sincere and nice people who have told me things that can't be true, okay? And it's a very difficult thing. Maybe some of you have seen this film. There's a short film where they're tossing a basketball around, and you watch it, and you don't notice, you're seeing it, and it's over, and they say, "Did you see the gorilla?" And there was a man in a full-size gorilla suit who walked through the thing and out in one door and came out the other one, and you didn't see it because you were watching him throw the basketball. And that says something about our limitation as witnesses to things. But I also, more about my own background, I felt like my background from school was authorities will tell you things. Authorities will tell you things, and if you're smart, you'll believe them. And if you're dumb, you won't believe them. You'll waste time, because eventually you'll find out the authorities are right. And so my cultural upbringing was that find the best authority and believe whatever they tell you. And that was kind of shaken by this, because then I realized that these authorities mean well, maybe they don't. But the techniques of good investigation are unknown to most of them, and they haven't done much of it. Also, it is true that the Air Force, they've admitted quite openly over the years in testimony that one of their main concerns was to encourage people to believe that there was something spooky going on. For about a 10 or 15-year period, that was their policy, to encourage people to think, ooh, what is that? And to talk about it, because they were flying some wildly exciting new aircraft at the time. And they couldn't avoid some people seeing them, but they wanted to immerse that in this big soup of bad reports. So they did that. But I think they stopped that by probably the 80s. I don't think they've done that in a long time. But during the 60s and 70s, maybe early 80s, their policy was to, let's have lots of reports. So they encouraged them, and they broadcast them, and they told the news reports about them. As more reports, the better, because that would blur their actual reports of their own secret aircraft that they were testing. That's kind of weird, but it's true. Anyway, yes, microphone right over here. Right there. You got to let her see your hand.
I'll be the fool and ask the question nobody else has. We're talking about flying objects we're talking about now. What about what started all of it in the New Mexico area? It was called Area 51 or something like that.
Right.
And we're not talking about flying. Supposedly they had concrete evidence on the planet Earth that they grabbed and took, and you never heard any more about.
Right. Two things about that. the main thing, this is Area 51, and Roswell, right, those two things. Roswell, New Mexico, they found a perfectly believable balloon. What they were experimenting on that the military didn't want you to know, didn't want anybody to know, or our enemies, was they were hoping that with this, the balloon had a reflecting ability, some sort of thing. And it had detectors on it. And what they were looking for was things like weapons tests. In other countries, they wanted to fly these over mostly China at the time. And so they would experiment with them, and then they'd make their own explosions, or they'd do things and make sure the thing could detect it. And that's what they were working with. And it was high, top secret, because if the Chinese knew, they'd just keep a little aircraft running around, easily shoot them down all the time. But this was supposed to be a clever, advanced technology look at any vibrations through the air. And that's what it was. And there's people have tried to say, oh no, that's some phony stuff. But there was a lot of mylar foil. Mylar foil is not going to come through space. It's part of the balloon and the device apparatus. Now, is there a place where there are bodies in a freezer? I don't think so.
I didn't hear the last thing you said, but I know there were reports that there were bodies that were discovered at Roswell.
Yeah. Oh, no. Most of the people don't think there were bodies at Roswell. There are bodies somewhere else. But they were taken to Area 51. And the Roswell thing never had claim. Well, by now they may have put claims of bodies together with that at Roswell. But most of the original claims had no large structures of any kind, and they didn't have any claims of bodies either. The balloons were unmanned, for example. There were no bodies. Yeah.
Any more questions? All right, well, thank you, Professor Garthright.